Great. So, so this presentation will be an introduction to RubyMotion, what RubyMotion is. Then we will actually talk about the future of RubyMotion. We've been working on a special feature of RubyMotion that we think is really cool, so we will show that. And we'll do a demo and show you the integration of RubyMotion and RubyMine. So today I will be the speaker, but I will be assisted by Mark Villacampa, which is our Spaniard resident. He's one of our team members. He lives in Spain and he's connected to the chat window. So if you have any questions, you can type them there and Mark will answer them to you. So let's start. Before I start, a little bit intro about myself. I'm basically two things. I'm a software programmer and lately I'm a company founder. So right now I'm kind of doing half programming and half company management. So it's kind of a unique position. I'm from Belgium as well, so I'm from Europe. I've been a Ruby programmer since 2002. I really like Ruby. Before I was using Perl. Perl was my favorite scripting language, but I realized that the code I was writing in Perl, I could not maintain it anymore 2 weeks after. So I was looking for a better language, and eventually I used Ruby. And I've been using Ruby since as my application, my application for programming languages. So I've been very happy to do that. Between 2004 and 2012, I worked at Apple for quite a long time, and I worked on a lot of products. I started on iCal and iSing, then I switched to iLife, which was a set of high-level applications that Apple gave to us 10 users. Then I worked on OS 10 from a Tiger to a Mountain Lion on various things, especially the low-level stuff, such as the Unix layer, the BSD layer, the Darwin layer. And also at Apple, I contributed a lot to Ruby Cocoa, which was a bridge between the Ruby runtime and the Objective-C runtime. And I also created the MacRuby project at Apple, which was Apple's implementation of the Ruby language. But in 2012, I decided to leave Apple to create my own company. And I've been doing this since. The company is called HipByte, and today we have some sort of a special announcement. We actually are growing. We are announcing HipByte 2.0, which is like 5 times more people than we had last week. So we now have 13 people, and we are now offering services such as mobile backend consultancy. So we have a new website, hipbyte.com, that you can check if you're interested in knowing more about us. And of course, the address is hipbyte.com. So that's all about me. Let's talk about RubyMotion now. RubyMotion is our product. It's a toolchain to write native mobile apps in Ruby. Native is very important here because RubyMotion lets you write the same apps that you would also write in Objective-C, Swift, or Java. You get real native apps that can do exactly everything that Objective-C, Swift, or Java can do. So that's very important to know that because other toolchains mentioned basically say that they are native, but they don't offer the same capabilities. Here we offer the exact same thing. It's cross-platform, so the application that you write with RubyMotion, you can write iOS application and Android application. And you can also write OS 10 applications if you want, but these days people are really focused on mobile. And it is designed for Ruby programmers. So because I'm a Ruby lover, I designed RubyMotion so that it can please me and it can please also other Ruby developers. And the main idea behind RubyMotion is to provide a consistent experience when you do cross-platform mobile native development. So we want you to have the exact same experience when you work on iOS and when you work on Android. So that's very important. If you look at the state of mobile development today, of native mobile development, I must say, so there are 2 major platforms, of course, iOS and Android. And when it comes to languages, on iOS, you can basically use 2 languages, Objective-C or Swift. Objective-C is the de facto language for APIs, and it has been the de facto language since the incorporation of Next at Apple. It's a C-dilated features, and a few years ago, Apple announced a new programming language called Swift, which is very different than Objective-C. It's more static, and so you can choose between these 2 languages. On Android, on the other side, everything is in Java. So you gotta learn and you gotta use Java when you write apps for Android. When it comes to the environment, basically the environment where you write your apps, on iOS, you gotta use Xcode. Xcode is the IDE that Apple gives you to write apps. And when it comes to Android, you have a similar environment called Android Studio. No, Android Studio is a totally different beast than Xcode. So there are two separate applications, two separate IDEs that you have to use. So that can also be very interesting when you have to do cross-platform development. And finally, you have two sets of APIs, of course. On iOS, you have a lot of APIs to write apps, which are mostly in Objective-C, but also C. And in Android, you have a lot of APIs as well, which are all in Java. So basically, if you want to do cross-platform development today with the tools that the vendors give you, so Google and Apple, you have to switch between languages, environments, and APIs. So that's not very easy, right? And with RubyMotion, we actually want to simplify this by actually fixing the two first rows of that table. We want to provide the same language on both platforms. So instead of switching between Objective-C, Swift, and Java, you can use Ruby everywhere. And when it comes to the environment, we want you to use your favorite text editor or IDE and the terminal. So we don't want you to use Xcode or Android Studio, and we don't want to force you to use any text editor. We want you to use the text editor you already know and like, which can be any editor. So that's our philosophy. And of course, you can use from RubyMotion, you can use all the iOS APIs and all the Android APIs. So everything that you can do in Swift, Objective-C, or Java, all the APIs that you can use, you can also use them from RubyMotion. So that's our product. And to describe a little bit how RubyMotion works, we need to talk about unified Ruby runtimes. It's a very specific design of RubyMotion that we absolutely have to cover before going further. So basically, in RubyMotion, we have custom implementations of the Ruby language for each platform we target. So we have two implementations of the Ruby language, one for Cocoa, which is iOS, watchOS, and tvOS, and another OS 10, sorry, and one for Android, which is Android, right? So for iOS and also for other Apple platforms, we decided to rewrite Ruby, the Ruby language, on top of the same runtime that powers the Objective-C language. So Objective-C and Ruby are different languages, but they share a lot of capabilities and semantics. And Objective-C is a statically compiled language, but it is powered by a very powerful dynamic runtime. And we decided to rewrite Ruby based on that runtime, which allows us to have a very, very good approach when you write applications. So you can basically have a very nice integration. In RubyMotion for iOS, everything that you do in Ruby is actually, it automatically exists in Objective-C as well. When you create classes, objects, or methods, they are automatically Objective-C objects, classes, and methods. And vice versa, from RubyMotion, you can access all the Objective-C APIs that Apple give you as if they were written in Ruby. So we're a very, very integrated system with iOS, which allows us to use all the APIs at no performance expense. So in RubyMotion, there is no bridge that actually connects you with two different runtimes. We actually have Ruby on top of the platform runtime. And for Android, we have exactly the same thing. We decided to rewrite Ruby on top of the same runtime that powers Java. So now it's a little bit different because the Java virtual machine doesn't really allow you to write native code by default. So for that, they offer what they call JNI, Java Native Interface. It is a C interface for the Java virtual machine. And we actually use that to actually rebuild Ruby. So it might sound complicated, but essentially it is the same as we do for iOS. Everything you do in RubyMotion in Android, it is Java. So all the objects that you create are Java objects, and vice versa. From an application that you create, you can basically access the entire set of APIs written in Java from Ruby. So that's very cool. So if you want to know more about the Hello World in iOS, here it is on your screen. It's a code snippet, and it doesn't really look more like Ruby code. It's because this is a direct translation of Hello World in Objective-C. So everything that you see here on that screen is actually an Objective-C method. For instance, a UI view controller is an Objective-C class defined by UIKit, and we can just access it like this, UI view controller.new. The same thing goes for the methods. For example, make key and visible, the method that's called on the window at the very bottom. It is an Objective-C method, and we can just call it right here in Ruby code. And finally, as you can see, we actually create a method called application did finish launching with options, which is a method that we create on the app-delegate class. And this is how you actually start the entry point of a typical iOS application. You need to implement one of those methods on your application delegate, which will be instantiated by the iOS system. So what you see here is a direct translation of how you do hello world in Objective-C or Swift. There is no difference. Of course, the main difference is that you use Ruby instead of Objective-C or Swift, but you can call the entire set of Objective-C APIs, iOS APIs from Ruby. So that's how you do hello world. And of course, when you run the application, you get hello world on your simulator. When it comes to Android, the snippet is actually smaller because Android is a bit simpler in that regard. But again, we have the exact same thing as iOS. What you see here is a direct translation of what you would get if you were using Java. Of course, Ruby is a bit more concise. In Java, you would have maybe twice the number of lines, but essentially it is the same. Android widget text view, for instance, that we instantiate in the code snippet is a Java class, and we can just access it as if it was written in Ruby. And also the main activity class, we actually subclass it. We subclass Android app activity, and there we can just redefine onCreate, and then we can call super to call the super implementation. What you see here, you have to do the same in Java. So again, everything that you can do in Java, you can do in Ruby, but this is Ruby. And when you type, when you launch this in your Android emulator, you get hello RubyMotion. So that's very cool. So that's all Ruby. Also, something that's very important if you have used other Ruby implementations in the past, RubyMotion is statically compiled. It is very different from other Ruby implementations. Other Ruby implementations basically parse Ruby at runtime, or they compile Ruby into bytecode, which will be evaluated at runtime. In RubyMotion, we don't do that. In RubyMotion, we statically compile your code into a binary at build time. And then you run the binary on the emulator, on the simulator, on the device, and you send the binary to Apple or the App Stores or the Play Store at Google. So we use LVM as, we actually created a compiler using LVM that basically statically compile Ruby into machine code directly. So in RubyMotion, there is no virtual machine, there is no bytecode interpretation, it's only a binary. So it is very, very similar as Objective-C or C or C++ or Swift. You get a binary at the end. So static compilation allows us to have native binaries for our apps. For iOS, we create a native executable. So it's basically the same thing as Swift or C or Objective-C. And for Android, we create a native library, which is a GNI native library that we will actually require, that we will load inside a dynamic application. So it's very important to notice that, again, there is no interpretation, there is no bytecode. In RubyMotion, where you have a binary. And also, the original Ruby source code is not present in the application bundle. So the Ruby code that you write, it will not be in the application. You won't see .rb files, and if you look at the strings of your binary, you won't see the Ruby code there, because everything has been compiled into assembly using our compiler. And also, we make sure that applications written in RubyMotion weight only a couple of megabytes. We don't want application to be too big. So that was static compilation. When it comes to the interface, everything is driven by the command line. So we really wanted Ruby programmers to, because we know Ruby programmers are very comfortable with the terminal, we didn't want to enforce a graphical user interface for RubyMotion. So RubyMotion works with the terminal, and then you can use any text editor you want. You can use Vim, Sublime, TextMate, Emacs, or you can use RubyMine. And of course, we will be using RubyMine in this presentation, and we'll also be discussing how RubyMine is probably the best environment if you want to write apps in RubyMotion. But you can use any text editor you want. You can even use Emacs if you have a lot of fingers on your hands. Basically, I'm more of a Vim user, but we will actually show how you can use any text editor. Creating a new project in RubyMotion is very, very easy. From the command line, you can just create motion, create, and then the name of a project, and it's going to create a directory under that name, and you can just cd into the directory and you can start working. Of course, because RubyMotion supports a lot of platforms, you can provide the name of the platform you want to create a project for. So template equal iOS for an iOS project, template equal Android for an Android project, template equal OS 10 for a Mac project, and with other platforms as well, such as tvOS, watchOS. You can create extensions, you can create a RubyMotion gem, so everything is documented on our website. But basically, you create things on the command line. So the project configuration is very, very important as well. We have one reg file that has the entire project settings. So if you look inside the RubyMotion project, you won't see an Xcode project or an Android Studio project. We don't use Xcode at all or Android Studio at all. We use Rake, which is the de facto build system of Ruby. And by default, you will see that there are only 4 or 5 lines in a reg file. Basically, we just provide a name for a project. Everything else is actually derived from same defaults. For example, on iOS, you can customize the code sign certificate or the provisioning profile by changing the app.codesign certificate or app.provisioning profile in your reg file. So everything that you can do in Xcode or Android Studio, you can do it here in the reg file. And it allows us to have the entire project configuration in one place, which is very cool. And you can type reg config to see the complete project settings, including the default that we generate for you. Running applications is very simple. You can just use reg tasks. So reg will launch on the Android emulator on the iOS simulator, and reg device will launch the application on the device. Distributing an application also is very simple. We have 2 separate tasks that actually create a package, the same package that you would get if you were using Xcode or Android Studio. On iOS, you get an IPA package, and on Android, you get an APK package. And this package, you can send them to the App Store or the Play Store. You can also send them to distribution systems such as TestFlight. You can also upload them to your device manually using iTunes or the ADB command line if you wish. So you really get the same package that you would get using the main tool of the vendor. Except that here you create them using reg. You don't have to go in Xcode and click buttons. And we have an excellent integration with RubyMine. RubyMine is probably the best IDE if you want to do RubyMotion development. Here I will just show you some of the integration that we have been working with JetBrains. The best feature, in my opinion, is the code completion. If you do iOS development with RubyMotion, you know that you have to call Objective-C APIs, and they have very, very long selectors, method names, and it can be a problem if you don't really know the API by heart. You might introduce typos, and that's not very easy. And with RubyMine provides you contextual code completion. So it provides completion, that's normal, but it's even smarter than that. It will provide you completion based on the context, based, for example, on what you're typing. As you can see here in that screenshot, it's actually going to complete one of the initializer of the UI tab gesture recognizer class. So it knows exactly what you're trying to do. It doesn't actually provide you everything there. So it's very nice. It allows you to be very, very performant when you write code. You can write code much faster with RubyMine. It also has inline documentation. So if you don't really know what you're using, you can have this pop-up that appears that basically describe the documentation for a given method, given argument, these kind of things. It has refactoring support, which is very nice. Of course, refactoring exists in pure Ruby project, but with RubyMotion, they actually went one step further. For example, iOS has the concept of target action. So target is an object and action is a selector. So you use that for callbacks. And of course, when you write an action, you need to provide the name of a method, but you may not have created a method yet. And here, RubyMine lets you create the method. So that's very, very cool. And the second best feature, in my opinion, is the debugger. RubyMine lets you break set breakpoints in your RubyMotion projects, and then from the breakpoint, you can actually inspect everything. You can see all the threads of your process. For each thread, you can see the stack trace and all the variables on the stack. So that's very cool. And the debugger also works on the device. So if you debug an application on your device, you can set breakpoints as well. So this one is one of the reasons why you probably want to use RubyMine. And finally, we have also integration with testing. So if you write tests for your RubyMotion application, RubyMine will let you run them, and graphically you will see what's happening. So that might be visually more interesting than running that on the command line. Anyway, so that's the integration. Of course, there is much more, and you can actually find this on the JetBrains website. They have a special page dedicated to the RubyMotion integration in RubyMine. So it is jetbrains.com/ruby/RubyMotion. And of course, you can also find it on our website or on Google, but we highly recommend that you try that. So what's RubyMotion essentially? It's a static ahead of time Ruby compiler. So it compiles Ruby code into machine code. It has two runtimes, two implementations of the Ruby language, one based on Objective-C for iOS, OS X, tvOS, and watchOS, and one based on Java for Android. It has a build system based on Rake, so everything you do is in Rake, and it has a REPL, which I will show in my demo a little bit further. So that's RubyMotion. That's a lot of things. RubyMotion Starter is a free version of RubyMotion that we started about last year. It is free, it is fully featured, so you can access everything in iOS and everything in Android. So we don't limit you, for example, in a simulator. You can actually application on your device. You can submit apps to the app stores. So it's fully featured. The only trick is that application that you create have a splash screen, and if you want to remove it, you can purchase a subscription. So that's it. And you can download RubyMotion Starter on rubymotion.com/download, and from there you can get started very quickly. So just a few slides about WWDC. As you know, yesterday was the first day of WWDC, and Apple announced a lot of things, especially new versions of iOS, OS X, tvOS, and watchOS. So we've been, of course, working on what Apple announced. Yeah, exactly. So there is a new version of pretty much everything, and also OS X has been renamed to macOS. So that's also important to notice. So we have to rename that in our product as well. But we have to support these 4 versions. So we've been working very hard last night, and I'm very happy to announce that we'll be shipping RubyMotion 4.13 very, very soon. Maybe later today, or maybe later this week, but it will be supporting everything that Apple has been released yesterday. So we have that. So if you've been following Apple News and you actually like RubyMotion, don't worry, we got you covered. So now let's talk about the future of RubyMotion. That's probably the most important part of this presentation. Now that you know what RubyMotion is and how it works, you may wonder, you may have a lot of questions, and we try to answer them what we think is the best feature of RubyMotion. If we look at that table, as we can see, there is an obvious mistake here, and there's an obvious problem. You write application Ruby, you can use any text editor you want, but you have to use iOS APIs and Android APIs. Yeah, that's the main issue here. And so basically, if you make an app, you have to use platform-specific APIs for the user interface of each app you write. You can share command code because everything is in Ruby, but you still have to use APIs on iOS and APIs on Android, which means that you need to learn 2 sets of APIs, of course, but more importantly, you need to maintain 2 different code bases. That can be an issue. Even if you can share code, and we believe that you can share more than half of the code, you still need to maintain 2 separate code bases. So we've been thinking a lot and working a lot, and we believe that we have a better approach for this issue. And our solution is to introduce some sort of a layer on top of the iOS SDK and the Android SDK, a framework, basically, a Ruby framework, which would be fully cross-platform and which would provide a set of APIs work on both platforms, allowing you to have only 1 code base. And that solution is called Flow. That's a nice animation, right? So my wife made it if she's watching the screencast. And Flow is our solution for the future of RubyMotion. And Flow is a cross-platform framework for RubyMotion. More importantly, Flow is probably the race of RubyMotion. It allows you to very speed up and write very nice apps. And the idea behind RubyMotion Flow is that you have one code base that runs on iOS and Android. So with only one code base, you can target both platforms. You don't need to have two separate code bases anymore. So Flow essentially is a set of code platform libraries for RubyMotion. It has a lot of libraries that I will mostly talk about very quickly right now, but we have networking feature, we have JSON, we have DJS, we have a store API, we have stuff for location, we have stuff to do a task, and more importantly, we have stuff for UI. So for example, there is a simple net snippet, so networking code that you can write in Flow. That's a GET request. And the code that you write here will work on both iOS and Android. Before Flow, you actually had to write specific code for that. You had to use iOS specific APIs and Android specific APIs. There wasn't a nice abstraction, and now there is one, so you can write only one code base. You can also do post requests like this, very similarly. You can check if a node is reachable. Again, this is all cross-platform, which is very, very nice. And this is useful in apps. You probably want to check if your server is reachable, and if it's not, you want to show a different user interface to your user. You can also do with JSON stuff, such as parsing and generating JSON. You can access the basic cryptography algorithms from Flow. You can do base64 encoding and decoding. You have a store API that lets you basically store very simple information in your app, such as preferences or user profiles. And this API, again, is cross-platform. If you had to, before Flow, you had to write specific code for each platform, and that was kind of messy. And here you can just use that. We have stuff for location monitoring. That's very, very important. Pretty much every app that you write in mobile, we probably have to deal with locations. And here you can use only one API. Again, before Flow, it was kind of a problem. You had to write two separate code bases. You can also do reverse geocoding. If you have the name of a place and you want to retrieve all the information, you can do that. You also have tasks, so you can start timers and also start things after a certain delay. This is going to use very different implementations, of course, as you can imagine, because iOS and Android are very different. But here, the beauty is that you write only one piece of code. You can also dispatch stuff on the main thread, and you can also dispatch thread on the background thread. As you can imagine here, on iOS, it's going to use the dispatch, the Grand Central dispatch, and on Android, it's going to use a pool thread executor. That's a class given by Google in the Android SDK. So, but here the beauty again is that you can just write this really, and you know that it's going to use the right thing. You can also schedule, you can also create sequential queues. I'm not going to talk much more about that, except that it's very useful. It's a very useful pattern if you want to avoid deadlocks. If you want to avoid creating mutexes for multi-threaded programming, you can use sequential queues instead. But of course, the biggest one is the UI. We have a UI library in Flow. And it's basically two things. It's a set of cross-platform classes for UI component, and it's a cross-platform layout system. We have a bunch of classes in UI. We have a lot of them. And of course, we haven't done yet. We will add more and more and more. But you can find the usual suspect. We have a button class, we have a double class, we have a view class, a screen class. So pretty much everything that you would expect from a UI toolkit exists already in Flow. But the more important part is the layout. In Flow, we have a common layout system for both iOS and Android. We don't use auto layout in iOS or the Android layout system in Android. We use something else. We use an implementation of Flexbox, which is basically CSS, and we provide a Ruby API for it. It doesn't mean that we actually have a CSS engine or a JavaScript. No. It's a C implementation of Flexbox that we actually expose to you, and you can use it to lay out your views. So it is very easy to use if you're a web developer. And also, the great thing is that what you do in Flow, it will look exactly the same on iOS and Android. So you can customize, of course, the size and the position of your views. You can specify the padding, the margin, and the border. And also you have all the Flexbox variables that you can set. But let me show you a demo. So I will go to RubyMine and I will just start. So here I have a very simple Flow application in RubyMine. I will talk about it further, but we basically I have two windows here, and I have the iOS simulator and the Android simulator. And here I have my Flow REPL. And the great thing about Flow is that it has a unified REPL. So the expressions I type here, as you can see, they actually run on the iOS simulator and the Android emulator. So for example, if I resize my window here, like this, I actually set BG as my background view. I can change the background color to blue, and as you can see, it's gonna automatically change both my iOS and my Android simulator. So that's very cool. So I can go back to white. So let me show you a little bit what we do with Flexbox. So I'm going to create 3 views: red, green, blue, each. And I'm going to create a view. Okay, I'm going to set width equal 50. And then I'm going to set the background equal X. Then I'm going to add the view as a child to the background. So I can run that, and now I can do pg.ru.update layout. And as you can see, I have my 3 views, and they are actually right there: red, green, and blue. Now I can actually get the first one, and I can, for example, change the width to 80. Then I can update my layout, and of course now the middle one has a bigger length. So that's Flexbox. Now, of course, if you know Flexbox, there is a very interesting here website that lets you understand how Flexbox works. And for example, you have flex direction, which can be used to specify if you want row or column. And if I come back to RubyMine, by default, as you can see, it is row. So I can actually flex direction. Sorry, let's print. So it's column, sorry. So we'll put it to row. Now I can update my layout. And as you can see now, the layout is actually horizontal. I can also, for example, so this is row. Here in my second one, I can actually set align self to center, and it will put the second view right there. So I can actually do that. Let's try that. So let's go back here, and I will put align self equal center. I can update my layout, and now the second view is actually ordered there. So that's very cool. And of course, I can align, I can justify content center for flex container. So if I go back to RubyMine, boom, it's actually right there in the center. So as you can see, you can pretty much do everything you do in Flexbox, you can do it in Flow. Of course, these are very simple views. So now let me show you what you could actually build in Flow. So for that, I will remove my simulator, and I will start it again, because I think my Mac is using too much CPU right now. As you can get perhaps you can hear it. I'm using a MacBook Air right now, and it's using a lot of CPU. So here I'm going to build a very simple app. I'm going to build a to-do application for you entirely in the terminal. So that's going to be fun. And so I'm going to start again the simulator. So I have both my screen here and I have my REPL here. So again, if I do P123, as you can see, I have two things here. So I can actually put this a little bit higher. And let's create a label first. Let's set text to favorite food. Okay. Now let's add the label to our view, and let's update the layout. So now, as you can see, I have my label here on Android, and I have my label here on iOS. Favorite foods, right? I can also change the text alignment to center if I want the label to be centered, which is what I really want. Okay, so now I'm going to create a list. And I will set flex equal 1. Flex equal 1 means that I want my list to take as much space as possible in the layout engine. And that's pretty much it. I will add my list to my background, and I will update the layout. So you don't see it, but there is no list view right there. But since there is no item in it, so you don't see anything. Actually, I can, for example, data source, which is by default. Oops, sorry. That's not BG that list. This data source by default is empty, and I can set it to, for example, sushi, taco, ramen, and now I have my 3 items. So now you can see it's actually a real list. So let's create an input text field now, and UI input text new. Oh, sorry, it's text input. So I'm going to give it a height of 40, and I'm going to set a placeholder of this type name of food. And I'm going to add my input to my background, and I'm going to update my layout. And as you can see, I have a text field here. Please type name of food. Please type name of food. As you can see, the input is actually at the very bottom because the list is taking all the space. Because I actually set flex equal 1, if you remember. Now we're almost ready. I'm going to create a button. New. I will set the title to an app, for example. I will set also a height of 40. And I will add my button to my background. And I will update my layout. So now I have a button add, and I have a button right there that we can see because of the color. So I will set color equal black right there. So because in iOS, of course, it's transparent by default. So I have a add button there and a add button there. And of course, the button doesn't work. I have to connect it to something. So I can do button on tap. Then here I have my handle. And from there, I will actually get my list, data source. I will add to my data source the value of my input. So what you write in the input text, I will actually add it to my data source when you type on tap. So I can do that. And now let's try. I can type, what should I type? Pizza. And boom, it appears here. And here, if I type pasta, it appears there. So that's a very, very easy application, right? As you can imagine. There's nothing very interesting here. But let me actually show you how it's implemented. So if I actually close this, and close this, okay. Now I will go back to RubyMine, right there. And I will uncomment this, which is basically the code of my application. It's more or less the same code that I wrote for you in the REPL, except that it's a little bit better because we have a clean button. And here on tap, we have we can actually blur the input when we don't actually use it anymore. But one thing I wanted to show you, for example, is on UI level. If I actually check the implementation of UI level, as you can see, it has two separate implementations, one for Coco and one for Android. Let's check the Coco application right here. And we have a bunch of APIs, so color equal, text alignment equal, the stuff that I use for you. And if you look at the bottom, this is what we actually allocate for you. We actually allocate a UI label object. This is the Cocoa object that you would allocate if you were using label. Here we actually have this very nice Ruby class on top of UI label. And if you're actually interested and you actually call an Objective-C method on your Flow label object, you can use proxy that will actually give you back the internal object that we create for you. And from there, we can do everything we want. So that's, of course, iOS. And if I check the Android version right there, you can see that we use here text view, Android widget text view. So again, if there's something that you want to call in Android on your label, you can do that. So that's pretty much cool. And of course, because this is RubyMine, you can do you can basically have like auto completion for pretty much everything there. And you can also use refactoring. For example, as you can see, this is pretty not very nice from the Ruby point of view. I can actually select this, and I can actually go to refactor. I can do extract method, and I will do create button, and it creates automatically a method for me, which is much nicer. And you get access to all the features of RubyMine there, so that's pretty cool. And that's pretty much it that I wanted to show you with Flow. It's actually very complete. I also wanted to show you that we have, of course, this is a very simple app, but we've been working, oops, sorry, I don't know much. We've been working with an application for a customer, and they allow us to actually show this application to you guys. It's an application that they use for a very big pharmaceutical customer. And we wrote this application in Flow for them. So what you see here is the same code base. It allows you basically to get information about icons that you have close by. I'm not going to talk more about the application itself, but the interface that you see, it is entirely in Flow, and it's only one code base. So it has like filtering stuff right there. You can see that's pretty cool, and you can have the same thing on Android. Android emulator is sorry. Oh, I can't show that, but I can show you the team view. Here you can actually add a new team right there, which basically allows you to create a new team, and everything that you see here is entirely cross-platform. So it's only one code base. And so this is to show you that you can actually build a complex application with Flow. So that's pretty much it. So we go back to the slides. I will actually kill that. So that was a quick Flow demo. Flow is completely open source. You can check it on our GitHub. It's already used in production, as I was telling you. But more importantly, today we are releasing the first version of Flow. That's very important for us. It's a big milestone. And also, we have a lot of documentation that we've been working on in the past few days. So we're very happy that today we're releasing this first version of Flow. You can know more about Flow on the GitHub repository, invite/Flow. And we will be working with Flow as a Ruby gem for the time being. And when it is fully complete, we will actually integrate it in RubyMotion 5. So that's our goal. So please give it a try. We really want you to try Flow. You can simply type gem install motion flow, and then we'll be started. And you can actually try to use it and report us problems if you see some. We are very, very interested in your feedback there. We think it's the future of our platform. So what's RubyMotion? Again, this slide, it's a lot of things: static ahead-of-time compiler for Ruby, 2 implementations of Ruby, one for Objective-C, one for Java, the build system, and the REPL. And now it is a cross-platform framework. So it's one more thing that you have to keep in mind when you use RubyMotion. So let's recap. We are launching a new company, eBay 2.0. We offer consulting services. So more info on eBay.com. We are going to ship very soon RubyMotion 4.13 with support for everything that Apple released yesterday. New version of iOS, new version of macOS, tvOS, watchOS. So we'll be working on it. And in the meantime, you can download RubyMotion on rubymotion.com/download. And you can automatically use it with RubyMine. Everything is available by default. And of course, we released the first version of Flow today. We are very happy. And of course, you can know more about Flow on our GitHub if you want to know more. So thank you very much. I hope that the presentation was good, and I guess we go for some questions now if you have some. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Laurent, for your presentation. Thank you very much. It looks like a real magic for me. So hope I have some time to try it as well. So I have a couple of questions, and I'm going to read some of them. So could you please answer some of them? So we have about 10 minutes for that. Okay, so the first one. Does using GNI cause any performance issues for Android apps?
Now that we have actually figured it out, it is true that GNI is not very recommended when you use normal Java virtual machines, such as the Oracle one or the other mainstream virtual machine. But we actually saw that in Google it's different. Actually, most of Android is written with the GNI interface. If you look at the Dalvik or the Art web base, everything is open source. So we see that actually use it internally as well. And as far as we know, we haven't noticed any performance problem. Using GNI, of course, with RubyMotion for Android, we have a lot of room for optimizations. Right now, we don't do much of them because we believe that RubyMotion for Android is fast enough. But for example, the new version that will be shipping in a few days, I actually work on five or six very nice optimizations to make things faster. But GNI itself isn't really slow on Android. Of course, you have to use GNI carefully. You need to, for example, cache the method IDs, or you need to make sure that memory management is also a problem. With GNI, as you know, you need to make sure you don't create too many local references, otherwise you can just overflow the stack. You have also to be careful when using global references. You can easily overflow if you don't delete them or you don't need them anymore. So, but besides these usability issues, I don't think I haven't noticed any performance problems with GNI on Android. I know that with other Java VMs, that's totally different. But for Android itself, I don't think there is an obvious performance problem.
Okay, so thank you. The next one. Will you still be able to make iOS or Android specific layouts? Also, how do you handle different screen sizes where you want different layouts depending on screen sizes?
So, so for that, you can customize your. Is it a question? I guess it's a question for iOS or Android projects. But everything that you can do in Xcode or Android Studio, you can do them in RubyMotion. So for example, for iOS, I know that you have to provide special files in your resource directory, special default files named default dash, then a few numbers. And if you do that, then iOS will actually recognize your application to actually work on a bigger screen or bigger resolution. But basically, everything that you can do with Xcode, you can do with RubyMotion. So if it's, for example, a setting in the property list, you can do that. If it's to set a special image in your resource folder, you can do that as well. And of course, you have access to the APIs at runtime, so you can check at runtime the density of your of the system. If you have images, you need to make sure that you have images for all the resolution that you want to use. And for Android, it is essentially the same. So if, for instance, I'm not very familiar with Android programming with multiple sizes, screen sizes, but again, everything that you can do in Android Studio, you can do it in RubyMotion. So if it's to set, for example, something in your manifest file, Android manifest file, you can do that from the reg file. And if you have to provide different layouts for your application, you can also do that at runtime in using direct calls to the APIs. So there is no big problem with RubyMotion in that regard. There are lots of apps written in RubyMotion in the store that have been supported, that supported old phones, new iOS. We have apps for iPads, we have apps for watch, tvOS. And for Android, we have people who make apps for custom Android devices, such as like small tablets. Then we have people who make apps for phones or for bigger tablets. So basically, we support all of that because we don't really have anything. We don't really block you in there. So everything that you can do with Xcode or Android Studio, you can do that with RubyMotion.
Okay, thank you. Another question. Which RubyMotion book do you recommend for a beginner?
That's a very good question. So there used to be a very good book back by the pragmatic programmers, but I think it hasn't been updated since, and it's only for iOS. And right now, you really want to do iOS and Android, in my opinion. So I think that the best way to get started is to actually would be to actually read any iOS or Android book, because everything that you can do with iOS and Android, you can do them in RubyMotion. So you will have eventually. You will need eventually to know the APIs. The APIs are the more important things. So, for example, you can buy a very nice iOS Android book, and you can go through the APIs, the Java APIs or the Objective-C APIs, and from there you will be able to get started with RubyMotion very easily. Of course, you can skip the sections with Xcode and Android Studio because you don't have to use that. But basically, that's it. And a very interesting. So there are actually books for RubyMotion for Android and books for RubyMotion for iOS that you might find useful. There are some tutorials online, and we might actually be working on training modules later this year with our new company. So that's a plan that we actually have for this year. But otherwise, I mean, you don't really have to buy a RubyMotion specific book to be started with RubyMotion. You can buy any book about mobile development, and you can easily migrate to RubyMotion because the APIs are exactly the same. Now, when it comes to Flow is brand new. We will be working on it and shipping it as part of RubyMotion 5. And when it is fully complete, we might actually try to get a book written on it because it's going to be big. But right now it's still under development, even if we did the first release today. So, but yeah, I would say any book on mobile is fine.
Okay, thank you. And I believe that maybe we can share some links. What do you think on our follow-up email, Laurent? If you can
Absolutely
have a list, we can just send them,
yeah.
and I can add it on my blog post with the recording. So
Absolutely, I can send
what do you
you.
think? Okay. So I think that we can do that. Another question. Just let me choose the next one. Okay, this one. Could you talk about the challenges that you encountered creating Android apps using Flow?
The challenges. That's very interesting. Actually, so there was a lot of challenges when we actually created Flow itself. Working on Flow itself was a big challenge. But working on application with Flow on Android, you don't really have a lot of challenges, in my opinion. So everything that we provide you works because we actually use it in production. And we also try to document everything and make sure that our APIs are clean. So I guess the biggest challenge you might hit if you start using Flow with Android is that you might want to do something that we don't do yet. For example, you might want to actually customize a control, and we don't provide you the method for it. So which is why in that situation, we provide you the proxy method that I showed. You can use .proxy on any object, and it will give you the internal object. And from there, you can call any Android API. Of course, this is no longer cross-platform because the code that you write here will not work on iOS. So you actually have to do that in a specific folder. In Flow projects, you can have iOS-specific code and Android-specific code in two separate directories, so you can actually do that. And of course, because Flow is open source, if you do something like that, you can also contact us and we have the missing method for you. Or even better, if you can send us a patch, that would be even more awesome. So we can add that to the repository. And then eventually, if you want to do something in Android with Flow and that is absolutely not supported, for example, there are some widgets or some controls that we don't provide wrappers for yet. And from there, again, you can either do everything in direct calls, or you can contact us and we will write a wrapper for you, or you can contribute it back. But I think that's mostly the challenge that you might have if you start working on application flows, that there might be some missing stuff because it's very early. And so we'll be, of course, we are very, very happy to help people and to also help you if you want to become a contributor to the project. But that might be the only challenge, I think, because everything else is pretty stable at this point.
Okay, thank you. Another question. I think that we'll have a time for a couple of them, and then we will try to answer all the rest on our follow-up emails. So the next one, for Flow UI, I want to write apps that look exactly like any other native app. One obvious requirement is to be able to use the width, height, margins, gaps, etc. that are standard on iOS or Android. For example, I don't want to use a literal of 10 for a gap in pixels between two buttons. Instead, I would want to use a constant defined appropriately for the platform it will run on or some equivalent. How do I do this with Flow UI?
So that's a very interesting question. If I understand correctly, the person asking the question wants to know if it's possible to have to customize the layout based on the platform. For example, have different margin, different padding, or different object sizes based on iOS or Android. And so the best way to do that would be to actually have the notion of a style sheet. So this is something we have in mind for the next version of Flow. Be able to customize the layouts that I show you on the REPL on a separate object that would be applied on your screen. And from there, we could have iOS-specific style sheets and Android-specific style sheets. So that could be an option. Right now, with the version of Flow that we are shipping today, you can already do that, actually. So if you look at the Flow project, you will see that there is an iOS subdirectory and an Android subdirectory where you can have a platform-specific code. From there, nothing prevents you from creating a class on iOS and a class on Android that has different constants. And you can then access this constant from the other code, the cross-platform code that creates the layout, so that you can effectively have a different layout based on iOS and Android. This is something that we already do for the application I showed, because I don't know if you noticed, but the toolbars in iOS, toolbars for Android are very different. So that's something we have to work with, sadly. This cannot be purely cross-platform, but it is effectively possible to have to do that in Flow, because in your project you can do stuff for iOS and stuff for Android. So you don't need to have a 100% cross-platform code base if you don't want to. If you want things to diverge at one point, you can do that. You can provide different measurements for your views based on the platform, or you can also provide totally different user interface. So that's possible to do.
So I think that I believe it is the last question. Sorry for that. I will try to answer all the rest offline. So the last one for today. How big is the impact of Flow to packages like RedPotion?
Or is the impact of Flow?
RedPotion.
Okay, so basically we are, Flow is a project we started. So when we started RubyMotion, we actually never wrote a framework for it. We only designed the toolchain, and we shipped updates, and we support everything that Apple did. So that was what we were doing. And eventually we realized that, and we actually let the community build frameworks. So right now there are many frameworks written by the community for RubyMotion. And of course, because RubyMotion has been around for 5 years, some of these frameworks are not maintained anymore. Some of these frameworks are only for iOS, or some are only for Android. And there are lots of lacking things. And the thing is that the community is not really, a community works when they want, when they actually are interested. And actually sometimes developers change their mind, they switch to different tool chains. So we have people who were using RubyMotion that now switch to Swift, and vice versa. We have new people from the community of other toolchains that come to RubyMotion. So it's constantly updates. And the reason we did Flow is really because it's really time for us to have something, I would say, serious, something that really works well, and something that is really cross-platform. And there was no project that did that, which is why we did it. So when it comes to RedPotion, I don't really know. I think it's still maintained, so you can use it if you wish. Of course, we don't force you to use Flow, and we will not force anyone to use Flow. You can say use RubyMotion the way it was, but our goal is really to push Flow in as a feature of RubyMotion 5 and make sure that it's very, very stable, very, very fast. And we want you to use it, of course, but we won't actually push you to force you to use it. And JetBrains, I don't really know much. I know that the project they created is not purely cross-platform. So it started from a good design, but eventually it was a bit different. Also, the API they provide is very, very elaborate. So you basically need to learn a lot when you use these libraries because they're very, I think, elaborate. Flow is very, very simple. Flow is just a set of Ruby classes and methods. So we don't provide a DSL for you. There is no DSL in Flow. We actually would wish the community to write DSLs for Flow, something that makes application a little bit shorter. As I show you in the RubyMine editor, it can be a bit verbose, right? Button.new and then blah blah blah. It would be much nicer to have a nice Ruby DSL for it. But I guess that's pretty much it. So I don't really know much what will happen to RubyMotion or the other toolchains, all the other frameworks. But when it comes to Flow, it's really the direction we want to take.
Okay, thank you. So just one more thing from my side before we can finish with the webinar. I just want to talk a bit more about feedback. So can you see my slide? So please don't hesitate to contact Lauren, me, or Mark on Twitter. We also have our support email. You can answer any questions about RubyMine and about RubyMotion if you want to. I will answer or will forward to Lauren them as well. And we will also have a recording available on our YouTube channel, so please stay tuned. We will have an announcement on our blog. So you're very welcome. Your feedback is very welcome. So please don't hesitate to contact any of us. And thank you for your time. And thank you for listening. And I hope to see you on our next webinar.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for inviting me. And thanks, everyone.